Hi, this is Tessa again, and this is 20 with Tessa. This is part 2 of Veterans Gravesite Records. The first data set that we looked at was from the war dead from World War I and World War II that's on a British website. And after I did that, I decided to take a look and see what the Veterans Gravesite record information was for the United States. And so that's what this video is going to discuss. We're going to go to the Veterans Administration page and gather that information, put it into an Excel spreadsheet, and this one is not as easy as the British website. We're going to have a lot more tidying up to do. So if you have any types of records in the United States in this regard, let's take a look and see how we can do it. Okay, so if you're going to be looking at records in the United States for Veterans Gravesite, what you want to do is you want to go to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and the specific page is gravelocator.sem.va.gov. And this will bring up this page, and the first thing you're going to want to do is say match exactly, because keep in mind we're doing a one-name study and I'm going to be putting in the surname that I'm looking at. Now I want to go ahead and not limit it at all, so I'm including all cemeteries. It could be any name, it could be any birth and death information. So I've specifically asked it just to find every single Keogh with this surname spelling that is buried through the Department of Veterans Affairs, and that just means that they had the benefit of allowing them to be buried at a national, and that can be on the federal or state level gravesite. So we click that button and it's going to bring us our search results. And what you find, and it's a pretty quick search, and this might be again for me because Keogh is not as common a name as many others that are in one name searches. I would say that if I were putting a number on it, I would be between a small and a medium surname study. In any event, what I have for Keogh with the spelling K-E-O-U-G-H is 209 names that it found. And unlike the British website, you do have to grab this information and you just scroll through and it brings up 10 records, not 10, it brings up 20 records at a time. And so it is a process of grabbing 20 at a time and putting them into your Excel spreadsheet. So we're going to take a look at how you do that once you get it into your Excel spreadsheet. But the method of scrolling through and grabbing all the information is pretty simple, and we've done it in some other ones. Keep in mind that you want to start out with this displaying 1 of 10 or records. You don't want to start here because it might bring, you're not going to get your number, or it might cut off their name. You always want to start outside of the data set that you're grabbing. And after we've done that, I grab the information and I put it into my Excel workbook. And this workbook is entitled USA Service Member Grave Sites, and as you know, the instruction page is usually the first page on any of my workbooks, and it's explaining what the project is. So it's getting the information for Keogh and its variants from the USA Veterans Administration website. I list the tasks that are involved in that. I also list the methodology, and because this methodology is a little bit more involved than the last ones were, I've listed it all out here. You'll also notice that I found this one a little bit more challenging than some of the others, and so I contacted the Guild and asked for an Excel mentor, and that individual has agreed to take a look at my worksheet with the first entries for Keogh and see if there's an easier way of doing it. I have a feeling that there's probably not. There might be some macros, but other than that, it is the process of grabbing the information and tidying it up. The other thing that I always do is I make sure how many data sets, how many rows of information I'm going to have, or how many records I get. And as we talked about before, when I was at that website, I knew that I had 209 Keogh, with this surname spelling there. I also have more records to get for a total of 750. So far I've only entered the Keogh surname here. So I'm going to show you what the original looked like, and you find out that it all comes in, even with a copy and special paste, it all shows up in column A. And that's because everything is in that table, but there are tabs and colons and all kinds of information. And so the table is not that easy to work with. And part of the reason for that might be the Veterans Administration might have set that up originally so that, what they consider data mining isn't easy to do. But the other instance is it just might be that that's the way this table comes out in an Excel spreadsheet as opposed to some other type of spreadsheet. So seeing that all of this information came out in column A, I kind of played around with it for a while and came up with the way that it would work to be useful for me. So the red is my original record, and I leave that alone so that in case I ever have to go back and look at this, I have all that information downloaded. And then this is the information as it got tidied up. And I'll show you how I did it, but I basically took that information and worked with a method of copying and transposing because the information came in various rows and I had to put it across into the columns. So I titled the columns and I froze that top row so that I could follow it through, and then I took all this information and I just copied and transposed it. And I will say that it took probably about an hour to work through, and so it was more involved certainly than the British records, but the reason it was more involved was that you had to transpose the information. The other reason it was more involved is that with Veterans Administration, widows, minor children, certain other family members, if it's allowed, can also be buried through the Veterans Administration. And so their information is also listed here. And so you're going to have some individuals like Adelaide, who is the spouse, and that shows the relationship to the veteran right here. She was the wife of John Joseph Keogh Sr., and it also lists his rank and his service, but it lists the cemetery location. What you're going to find when you go down to John Joseph Keogh Sr. is you also have that gravesite entry. You can always combine them, you can do some of the research, whatever. But what you'll find is that you're going to have various people, but certainly you have to pay attention when you're transposing records here that you don't start transposing that record where you would for a service member, because their information came out as the service rank as well as the war that they served in before their birth and death information came out. So you want to make sure that you line up all your date of birth and date of death information and your burial location. And if you go back and we'll take a look at this first information, you see that on her second line, that's where that information comes out. If you were to look here, you would notice that his date of birth is the third set of information for him. So it's a method of copying and transposing, and you're also going to have to pay attention at the time you do it. I'll go back and see if I can play with a few to show you what that example looks like. But it's simply a matter of paying attention to it. And then at the point where you've entered all that information into your columns, you can go ahead and take out the information that shows up like date of birth, date of death, buried at, and just keep the information that you got. And that's what I did here. They all had date of birth included on this line, but then I went through and I did a replace and just filled out the information. A date of birth, for instance, here with a colon, replaced it with nothing, and that took it out everywhere and just left in the actual dates. After you've gathered this information, if you have a date of birth and a date of death, you're going to be able to, add another column here and come up with an age if that information wasn't included. and we'll just take a quick look, but it wasn't. And so you could go through here and add information, as I mentioned, about their actual age or approximate age at death. Once you know something like where they're buried, this person is buried in New York and you have the cemetery, you might go on to find a grave and see if there is a memorial for them there, and you could add some information. The other thing you could do is you could take a look at the city or the state that they are located at, and perhaps there's an obituary that you could find at Genealogy Bank or at any of the other newspaper obituary sites, because you now have a date to work with. You have their date of death, so their obituary should come within the next week time frame, and you have an area that you want to look at. For instance, in this case, you'd be looking in May of 1986, and you'd be looking in the Houston, Texas area, and you have the individual's name. So all of these record sets are really helpful to use to include these individuals in your one name study, and with a little bit of tidying up, most of them can be a pretty clean workbook to work with. So I hope that that helps you, and that you go and take a look at the U.S. Locator website for the Veterans Administration. Now, as I've mentioned before, if you have any ideas about other websites to look at to find the same type of information, or if you have any questions about how I accomplish some task in using that website or using the spreadsheet format, feel free to leave me a comment here at YouTube. You can also email me at tessa.keogh@one-name.org. You could post your question in the stream or privately on Google+. You could check out the Guild website to see if they have any additional information regarding these types of searches at www.one-name.org. You can also visit the Guild on Facebook or at Google+. So thanks for watching the video. I hope it proves helpful and that it's another opportunity for you to gather another data set, and all the best with your studies.